I now request Kamal Kishore to shed light on the form and function of the Coalition for DRI and take it forward from here.
Well, that's a tough task to shed light on function and form. That's what the panel is going to discuss. So what we are going to do is what you've seen in the agenda, form and function and form of the coalition, and then next steps and the closing ceremony. So we will combine all of them into one. We'll have just one session. We have already distributed a draft outcome document. If you haven't got a copy, we have spare copies floating around. I think most of you have had a chance to go through it. We will have a session where some of our colleagues have agreed to be on the panel. How we will do is that we will first hear their reflections on what's there in the outcome document, what else they would like to see. After that, we'll have open plenary discussion, followed by, one of the things that we are hearing, that the outcome document doesn't go far enough, it doesn't give details, it doesn't give timelines. So we have our colleagues from Indian Institute of Human Settlements and UNDP helping think about those things. So later, after that, I will ask Mr. Aruma Revi to talk a little bit about what are some of the ideas to taking it further. But before that, let's have a panel discussion and on the outcome document. For that, I will start from here. Luke Brown, if you could come up and join me here on the stage. Gavin, please. Our colleagues from South Africa are hiding there. Atyan from EU. Tapan, could you find him? Then Nadia. Nadia from UNDP. Andrew. Who are we missing? Andrew is here. Yes? If you want to. Sorry? Please. Then we have Joe Lightman. Where is he? Where is Loretta? Okay, so maybe we will start. I will as well sit down as well. So I guess everybody here has had a chance to take a look at it. So maybe we can start from the far end. So Luke, if you could talk a little bit about your reflections on the outcome document itself, the last 2 days more generally, and where do we go from here?
Thanks very much, Kamal, and thanks for inviting Australia to participate in this final session. Look, in terms of a broad reflection, I'm sure we've all got them. There's a sense of community building, or there's a sense of commonality. Someone used the word fusion earlier today in this space that perhaps I certainly haven't seen yet, particularly within within government to government circles, there's also a degree of openness in this forum that I haven't necessarily observed as much before. I think I can say this because I'm an emergency management official, but emergency management officials like to tell everyone that everything's going to be okay and that everything's under control. And in fact, it isn't necessarily so. I think what I would say here is that what the NDMA has managed to do is pull together a forum and a format that is quite inclusive, and I congratulate you on that. And we've got something that we can, I think, that we can latch onto and we can probably do something together on. I really am supportive, Kamal, of your approach and your team's approach of co-designing this and letting it be somewhat of an organic process. I know that I'm a bureaucrat as well, so I think I can say this about bureaucrats. Bureaucrats like to go straight to governance and they like to go straight to form, but I think we should just continue to let this evolve and build on that momentum and that commitment that seems to be there. Provided it's a trusting environment, and I think this one was a trusting environment, and we bite off things that we can. This is a broad topic, and we bite off things that we can focus in on. I think we can make quite a successful go of this.
Thank you. I did not introduce you before. I think most of us know, but Luke Brown is Assistant Secretary in Emergency Management Australia, Ministry of Home Affairs of Government of Australia. So do you have anything specific to say on the outcome document? Not necessarily at this point.
Look, I've had one quick read of it. Can I suggest I think there's a bit of an urgency to this issue. I've sort of quipped a few times in the last few months that we've all politely nodded about this issue for a really long time. There's a sense of urgency to action that I think is starting to become quite omnipresent, and the last couple of months, just in my country, demonstrates that the linkages between a changing climate and the ability of government to be able to respond through the agencies and services that they currently have is undoubtedly being tested. So if I could encourage just a slighter sense of urgency in the tone and the language, I think would be helpful. The other thing I would just suggest is that I don't think it would hurt us to put some markers in there for to hold ourselves to account too. So some time frames. It's I'm conscious you're trying to reach a consensus position here, but I'd be bold and I'd be putting some time frames around some of those initiatives that you've put forward. Finally, if you want, feel free to put in a reference there that we'd be certainly the Australian government would be willing to host some form of session if the perhaps in the context of next year's Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. I think that'd be a really good opportunity. We all travel enough probably to host something to ensure we continue the good work.
Shall we go back to the start of the line?
Sorry, thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Etienne Coyette. I'm working for the European Commission in the Service for the European Union Development Cooperation, and I'm the head of sector for climate change and disaster risk reduction. So back to our point. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer, the CDMA, and Kamal in particular, for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share so many interesting information with all of you here. It was very, very interesting, and we hope we are able to continue exchanging with you in this framework. Just a few weeks ago, our Director General was in visit to India and already expressed interest, his high interest in this workshop. He also expressed, an invitation to continue discussing about EU involvement within the CDRI. And I can confirm that to you. We would be very happy to continue discussing this with all the relevant services in Brussels. Preparing our participation here was also the occasion for us to work with all the services across the European Commission. And actually, there is already quite a lot that is going on in the EU. But what is still missing, apparently, is this kind of coordinated approach and coordination. CDRI could also help the EU bringing this in a better approach. Among the different initiatives that we could mention, there is one in particular that is already readily available and accessible to everyone here. It's an initiative from our Joint Research Center, the Disaster Risk Management Knowledge Center. It's pooling information on many different initiatives on disaster risk management. There's a lot of data available out there.
Focused on EU.
Not only on EU, no, it's quite general, so I guess it's of interest for anyone here in the House. Another important initiative is this Copernicus program, which is dealing with satellite data and translating this data for user-friendly information. Again, this is top quality technology and is free access, so I invite everyone also to consult the possibility to use these services, and we can see together how this can be made useful in this framework. And then the last one, maybe, where we would be happy to exchange with you, is our civil protection mechanism that is dealing with the rapid reaction after disasters. So it's not exactly dealing with resilient infrastructure in particular, but it has a lot of hooks and interesting information again. From the development cooperation point of view, this is very interesting if we continue engaging here, because we manage a set of dedicated programs around disaster risk reduction. Some of them were mentioned here. We are an important contributor to the Global Facility on Disaster Risk Reduction and Recovery. We also have specific programs on making cities resilient, for example, which deal a lot with this infrastructure resilience issue that kept us busy for these 2 days. And then we have also a lot of investment in infrastructure, and a recent analysis also shows that while we keep doing a lot, we could still make a lot of progress on actually integrating this risk dimension and the climate risk in particular into the investments we do in this sector. And that's again confirming our interest to continue exchanging within this framework with you. I will just stop here, just confirming the interest of the EU. We had a quick look at the draft outcome, and we basically say we can agree with everything that is in there. The only comment I would make is that the list of possible topics that the CDRI could actually work on is quite extensive. It reflects the complexity of the issues we address here. But for the sake of effectiveness, maybe it would be interesting to try to identify together maybe 2, 3, 4 priorities and try to organize the work around these in order to get to quick results. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could introduce yourself, Gavin.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Gavin McGillivray. and I head the UK Government Department for International Development office in Delhi. I've had the great privilege to be living in Delhi for the last couple of years, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. And I wanted first of all to recognise and congratulate the leadership of the Government of India of putting this, this field of thought onto the international consciousness over the last couple of years and taking the initiative to found this coalition. And if I may, I would like to acknowledge and recognise the personal leadership of Mr. Mishra, sir, and yourself, Kamal, in driving this forward within this country and internationally, because we absolutely think you've hit the nail with the hammer. This is a critical area for sustainable development. Unless infrastructure is resilient, the world is going to be investing trillions of dollars in infrastructure and in maintaining existing infrastructure over the next decades. And unless that's done in a way that is resilient to disaster, resilient to the way that climate change is accentuating disaster vulnerability, then we will not get sustainability. So this is the right area to be working on. And we also believe that there is a gap. This is not something that is repeating what is already being done out there. There is a real role for an inclusive coalition of the type that you have been promoting and which is being evidenced by the range of people today to bring together the various countries. There is no country that has the monopoly of knowledge on this. We are all facing the urgent necessity to make our infrastructure more resilient, to have national planning processes and create systems which are more resilient in the face of climate change and disaster. We can all learn from each other. The various international bodies and commissions can do more to learn to each other. So in terms of your excellent outcome document, and thank you and well done for putting it together, that's incredibly impressive. We again feel that it's great. We like the emphasis on inclusiveness. I was fortunate to be the UK member of the board of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunisation, Gavi, for 4 years. And that organisation has on its board government representatives, representatives from business, in that case the pharmaceutical business, representatives from civil society, and representatives of communities, people living with diseases. And that was a governance structure that was highly effective in making sure that all points of view were taken into account, and that imbued and imbues the operations of the organisation. So absolutely we agree on inclusiveness. The trick, and you've got this in the outcome document, will be not to allow inclusiveness to mean that we all have to move at the pace of the slowest. And I very much like your idea to combine getting on with this on a broad front and building the coalition with putting underway a number of collaborative startup activities, so that you're doing something and you're showing that the coalition is not a talking shop. It's getting something done. And I would agree with my co-panelists that have already spoken about the need for focus. And one option for focus would be to look at the important initiatives already out there. So Professor Jim Hall, who has spoken so well here, he's also on the Commission for Adaptation, and thinking how the coalition could combine with the Commission for Adaptation and help the Commission for Adaptation produce something actionable, and vice versa, I think that would be productive terrain. Professor Hall and yourself, Kamal, have also talked about the importance of systems-level adaptation, systems-level planning for resilience, getting resilience into national plans, and that might well be an area we could focus on early on. So just to finish off, I want to emphasize that we, United Kingdom, are very much supportive of this. We would like to be considered a partner on this. We have resources available tomorrow if you need to help get this on the road. So congratulations, and we look forward to going from strength to strength.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Anna Brebaert. I'm from the National Disaster Management Centre in South Africa. And also from our side, thank you very much for this very productive workshop. And I think it's an opportunity for us to learn from each other and to learn from best practices from a wide range of sectors and to take back home to see how we can incorporate it into our processes. I think in acknowledging the importance of infrastructure investment in our country, our President has already in the State of the Nation address committed to focus on improvements in our budget and monitoring systems, improve the integration of projects and build a broad compact on infrastructure with business and organized labor. So I think that statement already indicates the critical nature of infrastructure development in South Africa. And I think I want to take it further to say in South Africa we are experiencing infrastructure challenges with regards to new infrastructure, but also in terms of existing infrastructure that we need to rebuild or strengthen in terms of ensuring that it is resilient to to adapt to climate change and to shocks. We have a number of examples of infrastructure that failed recently, bridges and roads, and there's a real effort to ensure that we are making sure that these things are resilient for future. Maybe just an example of the impact of the region as well. We've talked about the cyclone Iwdri that has had quite a impact on Mozambique, but just to give an indication of the impact it had on our infrastructure, our electricity provider, Eskom, has got a very important line coming from Kibora Bassa Dam, and that has been affected by the cyclone, and it actually affects the electricity distribution at the moment in South Africa, because there's a big input from that line that has been damaged by the cyclone. So I think what we've seen in this workshop as well is the importance of regional collaboration. So I think we are quite excited about the approach that you've taken, so congratulations also on that in terms of ensuring that we look at existing structures and existing agreements, multilateral as well as bilateral agreements, and how do we cooperate in that context. And I think the one specific proposal that you were talking about in the outcome document is with regards to the explicit link to the Senai framework, as well as the SDGs and also the other post-development agendas, 2030 agendas. And then, so I think that is very important that we make sure that we do not necessarily duplicate, but that we put the necessary emphasis in terms of the infrastructure resilience. and that it specifically in going forward, I think it's important that we build that narrative into the documents and the objectives to make sure that we meet say how the coalition will support, how we will meet the Sendai framework targets, how we will meet the SDGs, how it can support the G20 thematic areas, and so on. So the narrative must also be communicated across all these fora. I think the thematic areas are also quite well captured in the document. I think you've increased some of the areas after the discussions from the initial ideas. So I think that is good because it's such a vast topic. One other important thing I think that will be necessary for us is to really make sure that we go back to our countries and identify the key sectors and the key drivers of how can we incorporate and align these principles into the various sectors, and how we can make sure that we work together to achieve a common goal. So it will definitely assist the proposals that you are making in terms of the startup activities, and I think we should in some way be able to duplicate those efforts in country to make the most of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gavin, you had another point to make.
Forgive me, Kamal, for me, but one thing I had meant to say is that I feel that the coalition has an opportunity and also a forcing mechanism in the climate change summit, the UN Climate Change Summit in September of this year. The UN Secretary General has invited India to lead on industrial strategy at that September summit, and UNSG has invited the UK to lead on resilience. So both, and many other countries here will be playing a role at that summit, and I think we should be thinking about either launching or using that summit as a stepping stone for the launch of the coalition. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nadia Rashid. I'm the Deputy Country Director for UNDP in India. And I'd like to start by thanking the Government of India and NDMA for this very important initiative. There's been such strong feedback that I've heard about deliberations over the past 2 days, and there's clearly a very strong willingness to work together and to collaborate on this important issue. For UNDP, we've been in discussions since the beginning. We believe that this is an extremely important endeavor. A couple of weeks ago, the regional director of UNDP was here, and he was fortunate that he was able to participate together with partners in discussions on the initiative. We also had last week, the head of UNDP, Akim Steiner, was here, and we were able to take forward discussions and also very clearly outline our commitments and our support. We very much want to build on the discussions here to continue to work together. The draft outcome document, I think, is a very good framework, and I think provides a good blueprint to move forward in a number of areas. I think it was a very good suggestion to look at linkages to the climate summit and ways in which we can also help to position during the climate summit. For the UN country team in India, I also just want to reiterate that we have a very strong collaboration across the UN country team. This is a priority for us. It's a priority for us to strengthen resilience, to work together in addressing climate and disaster resilience links. So the commitment comes from UNDP, but also from the wider UN country team in India to work together. I'll also mention that there's several colleagues who are here, other UNDP colleagues, coming from different regions, and for us, this is an extremely important opportunity for learning, to learn from each other, to build on the programming that we are supporting globally. to share our experiences and to share learning. So I'll just conclude by saying that we look forward to continuing to work together with the colleagues who are here and to moving forward on the outcome document.
Thank you, Kamal. There's just a few points I'd like to make. Here representing the Risk Nexus initiative, and I think one of the things we like about this coalition is that by focusing on infrastructure, we really are at the nexus, because it really brings together the disaster risk community, the climate change adaptation community, the finance community, the insurance community, the sustainable development community, and it brings them together around a theme which I think is of such great importance in the coming years. If we get it right, we can really make a difference on all these global agendas which have been mentioned. The second point I'd like to make is, well, I had the privilege of also being in this meeting a year ago. And again, as some of my previous speakers have mentioned, I'd also like to really highlight and thank, I think, the enormous progress that has been made in this last 12 months in pulling this together from the government of India, NDMA, and Kamal, yourself in particular, because I think we are at a completely different space to where we were 12 months ago. We're talking about this now in much more propositive, definite terms, rather than the rather more incipient terms we were talking about last year. I'd reiterate again what one of the earlier speakers said about instilling a sense of urgency into this, because I don't think now we have much time to get this right. If we don't get this right soon, the sort of gap between risk and resilience is actually going to open rather than close. So this does need, I think, getting set up now as soon as possible, and major investment into it as soon as possible. And finally, as others have said, I would fully commit our group to supporting this in any way we can as we move forward in our own areas of specialization. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think I concur highly with some earlier...
Introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I mean, I know you.
I'm Kees. My name is Kees van der Guchten. I'm representing the Dutch government, in particular the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, and I'm an advisor to them working with the Knowledge Institute, which is Delthuis. I concur very much with earlier said words on having this sense of, well, this is a community that has something tangible to act upon. And I think it's also progress compared to the first international workshop that we had on the same topic. I also think it has said at several moments in the deliberations that we had to seek coherence among those agendas. And then disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation, it's a bit logical to mention those next to those wider agenda items of SDGs in 2030. This ministry I worked with before, Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, has a number of portfolios under its mandate, which is about infrastructure, it's rail, roads, airports, and also water networks, next to more integrated water management and all its different uses. I believe that here together gathered, maybe some aspects of this wide field are not elaborated very much upon, and I just mention slow onset disasters, the droughts initiatives, and maybe also the social-oriented infrastructure, which is also a wide field. Those are recognized within the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction, and I'm very happy to see that you try to affiliate very closely with that UN agency. I'm talking about coherence and thinking of how my minister would read this outcome document. Please understand me, I'm not a native English speaker, as you can hear, but my minister isn't either. She will read, for example, well, in paragraph number 8, it talks about functions of the global coalition. Functions, okay, it might focus a little bit, maybe what already has been mentioned, system-level thinking, transboundary aspects may also be a niche which can focus something. But then the word says resilience building and climate adaptation. Although there's a drive for seeking coherence among those agendas, my minister will also ask, well, what makes it then different from our already substantial support to this global commission and center on adaptation? There was a plea for looking for joint working and bringing it close together, but has it added value to support it different? Or what is the mandate of this coalition where I would subscribe to? There have been recommendations to bring it to the highest level possible, which I would think is very logical to make an impact. But again, it would question the minister, what would be my role then? This high-level political forum, the GA summit. There are more of those summits, for example, the GA special thematic session on water and disasters. There's a help panel reporting to the UN Secretary General at the end. A high-level expert and leaders panel on water and disasters where she is a vice chair to. So there are a number of functions that she already has. And then she will be much looking at what is the added value here and what do I commit myself to from the perspective of the government. In the text, at several points, the word governments is mentioned, or countries is mentioned. And then at that moment, it's not clear whether you mean the responsibility of the minister, or what level? Yeah, at what level? Because it doesn't take away the intention of the Netherlands to very much be willing to share and learn experiences and technologies and financing constructions that you may have in this wide field. That's what we support very much, and which is also very much welcomed by the initiative taken by you from the India side, jointly with you and ISDR. But then I think I would very much propose to make this very clear for the level of commitment, the mandates that are there. At some moment it's maybe also about financial support and how it adds up to what is already out there. It's also good to be aware that within the EU system we do have a number of obligations also, and there's a lot of work being done within this field of infrastructure development and resilience and also climate adaptation, where it should link to somehow as well from the viewpoint of this national representation by the minister. I wish you a lot of success with further developing this process, which is very interesting and I'd like to contribute to personally. Thank you.
Thanks. Joe Lightman from the World Bank's Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. I think everyone's noted that the coalition has had a long gestation period, but we're now ready to deliver the baby. And the first comment is we really like the delivery method, because what the outcome document doesn't do is focus a lot on governance, process, institutional development. We could have gotten bogged down in that, and we would have missed the big picture. So it's important that the focus is really on substance and substantive outputs. The institutional arrangements will come in due time. The second point is that if the child is speaking already by September, then I think the Climate Summit is a great place to launch this. If there are some delays in elocution, then I think we could offer the annual meetings of the World Bank and the IMF and the Global Infrastructure Forum as a venue in mid-October for a possible launching. And the third point would be that it's always good to see as much detail as possible. And I think an outcome document, to a certain extent, has to be a lower common denominator. But we understand that there will be a presentation on some of the finer points where we look for sort of the low-cost, no-cost, initial low-hanging fruits the early wins that the coalition could produce in the next really few months. So that level of detail we're looking forward to, not necessarily in the outcome document, but in discussion later on. And I'd like to conclude with some good news. It's always a good thing to do. We're really looking forward to welcoming India as the next co-chair of GFDRR in July. And we understand that India will be advocating and championing resilient infrastructure as its sort of locomotive for what it wants to champion. And we hope that GFDR can be a source of institutional and financial leverage for the coalition as it moves towards adulthood.
Thank you very much. Joe.
Thank you. My name is Lori Heber-Girardet. I am the Regional Director of UNISDR based in Bangkok. And I'll be speaking again in a moment, but I would really like just to take a moment and say how gratifying it is to listen to our speakers share such enthusiasm for this coalition. Compared with last year, when it was still quite in a nascent form, it's quite clear that there's a strong political momentum behind this idea, and that really is taking root now. And I think the reason why it's so critically important is because for us, we see this coalition as absolutely fundamental to helping countries achieve the Sendai framework goals. Reducing mortality, reducing economic losses, reducing the number of people affected by emergencies, by disasters. This is all what this coalition will help countries achieve. It will also have knock-on effects, I think, as well. I think that some of the work that the coalition can do around data, for example, could really help promote greater transparency on data, greater interoperability on data, and greater data sharing, which will be a great benefit across multiple sectors. And I also hope that this coalition globally will help inspire greater collaboration at the national level. One of the challenges we see in implementing the Sendai framework, but also the SDGs, is fragmentation at the national level. Line ministries that are working in silos and not bringing on, to the extent possible, other stakeholders. And so this can really help set the pathway at the national level as well, perhaps for the creation of national level coalitions that are working on developing sustainable infrastructure development plans, which would then feed very much into the SDGs, planning and helping the countries achieve long-term, disaster-proofed sustainable development. And so thank you very much to all of the panelists here who really demonstrated support. Some even offered financial support, which in the field of disaster risk reduction we know is often not as forthcoming as we would like. So this is really a great beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think before we turn over to Mr. Aruma Revi, I think we can give a chance for the audience to say something. And there is a voice of social infrastructure rising from that corner, and Michael. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kamal. You take the words out of my mouth. Indeed, I'm Lars Byrne from UNICEF here in India. Basically, everything has been said how successful this is, and I just want to join the canon of this one. But also want to use this opportunity to make a suggestion how to further improve. This is basically a very tiny but I think important aspect. I think this coalition should basically build upon indeed these great commitments which were made in 2015, which are referenced here in the text. We heard about Sendai, the SDGs, but also of course the climate agreement. In that sense, we should not stay behind the agreements made there for social services and infrastructure to be resilient. Concretely, under the point, actually the bridge possibly between point 6 and 7, where there's reference that actually the coalition should respond to the sectoral demands, and then the next one, which basically brings the vision, mission, goals, and objectives, and refers to the SDGs, Paris, and Sendai. We could specifically refer to target E, which has a focus on making health facilities, education facilities, and other critical infrastructures resilient to disasters. Thank you.
Target D.
E, I think.
It's D.
Oh, you're better informed. Anyway, E or D, it's very close also. Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you, everyone. Michael Mullen from the Global Centre on Adaptation. I would just like to echo all the panelists in passing on my congratulations to the Government of India and specifically the NDMA for hosting what has been really an excellent event. I feel like I've learned a huge amount already in the course of a day and a half. And I think if this is setting the scene for what this initiative can achieve in the future, it's a really excellent first step. Now, my role at the GCA is developing an action track for the Global Commission focusing on infrastructure. And so we're really looking forward to working with you on this initiative as we develop the actions for adaptation to make sure that what we produce is more than the sum of its parts. Just on a kind of substantive point, and this is more of a personal comment, I think the broad scope of paragraph 8, it's great to be inclusive, and I think it'll be interesting to then work with you as that gets narrowed down to a few focal areas. I might also highlight the Global Commission in paragraph 13. Thank you.
Any more comments?
Thank you. I am Bolu from Mauritius. I believe that this coalition is a very laudable initiative. But to strengthen the coalition, I think it's very important to have some kind of protocol. A protocol whereby the highest decision makers sign and ratify it. In this way, we'll be able to reinforce the cooperation. And to operationalize a coalition, I think it's very important also to have some kind of strategy. It may be premature at this stage to have the strategy, but elements of the strategy are already in the papers which have been circulated. It's para 7, whereby we have the vision, mission, goal, objective, and so on. And para 8, whereby we have the functions. So I think these are elements of the strategy which we can develop, and these are elements also of the protocol that we can sign and ratify between all the members concerned. We also have para 13, whereby we can have the formal launch of the Cdri, and I think the protocol is the best way of launching the Cdri. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the countries? Otherwise, we turn over to Sarabjit.
My comment is related to paragraph 8.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sarabjit Singh. I work in UNICEF in India. My comment is related to paragraph 8. I'm missing the demand side work in this. So how do we communicate with the wider set of communities and stakeholders? And so if you may like to add communication for development here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Ken Kosone. I'm Economic Minister at the Embassy of Japan. I think the Japanese message already delivered by our ambassador at the opening. And the outcome document, I think, is very much well prepared. Just one thing, well, maybe two things. As Ambassador mentioned in the opening session, that the Japan is being hosting the G20 summit. And one of the important aspects is the quality infrastructures. And the resilient infrastructure is a main core of this quality infrastructure. So I hope you can somehow incorporate the quality infrastructure aspect as a main pillar of the, resilient infrastructure is the core of the quality infrastructure. Another thing is that the session before this one was the Japanese expert from the road maintenance has some presentations. I think the infrastructure itself is very important, but infrastructure, how you can use and maintain is also the very important aspect that you can really maximize the effectiveness of the quality infrastructure or the resilient infrastructure. And also how to use when you have a real disaster is also the another aspect. Without utilizing those infrastructure, you cannot survive from this disaster. So our expert already explained that one in the session before. So I think this aspect will be, in a sense, will be discussed in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Any final comments? Yes.
Hello, I'm Rajiv Verma, ED Bridges and Structure from Indian Railways, that is RDSO. My focus to follow up is step number 10. It is the basically research organization, specialist technical and research organization in the Cdri. I would request railways to be included in the research organization. In the railways we have RDSO, that is Research Design Research Organization. As you know, railway is the lifeline of any infrastructure. Apart from railways, we can always involve the specialist industry partner like from steel or say those who are constructing roadways. So they do have the specialists in their data. So that is my idea. So that you can consider. Thank you.
Are there any more? I think we'll have Mauritius and then Italy.
Thank you. I'm Daman from Mauritius. I really am very appreciative to the government of India as well as NDMA for this wonderful opportunity to be as SITS part of this discussion in the coalition. Probably a few comments from my side would be, my understanding of infrastructure was more about hard infrastructure, but we do understand from the definition of infrastructure, it's not only the physical infrastructure, it's organization. So when we're thinking about resilience infrastructure, we're also talking about resilient governments to resilient communities. So from the government top management or top authority to the last mile. And in this process, we have got the policies, the strategies, the standards, or similar terms. I think those could be very much inclusive in this draft document. Secondly is, I have gone through this wonderfully prepared document which was circulated on the first day and through which we have gone. And I think the way that you have very wisely put all the thematics, I think according to me, maybe this document should be in a sort of formatted in a thematic way. And probably, I have probably 5 or 6 thematic in mind, but I do believe you can very wisely put it in things like hard infrastructures, then social safety nets is very much important. Social housing, which we have not much talk about these last few days. And we know the poor are the most affected when we have got disasters. So how we secure resilient infrastructure for the most vulnerable, I think those also could be covered. And also having environmental infrastructures. I think all of us, we have a tendency to give away risk, and very surprised to see that during these 2 days forum, we saw people that were willing to buy risk, and we are willing to sell it. Just put it like that. We have got risks, and we want to transfer those risks. And we know that there are a lot of organizations, donors, and investors who are willing to buy those risks. But I believe that we have to have this, through this forum, a platform where the buyers of risk and the sellers of risk could be facilitated rather than having bottlenecks. We saw that in the past. So if those could be inclusive. And lastly, not the least, is about seeds. So our specificities are very, very, very different from many landlocked countries and big countries. And I just take an example from my colleague from Maldives. I think in the next few years or decade, they have to look for another island to go and stay. So what will happen to the infrastructure? So, and we are investing a lot on infrastructure. Should we not create more risk by investing in infrastructure? Thank you so much.
Mauro.
Yes, thanks. Kamal, Mauro Dolce from Italy, Italian Civil Protection. I would like to stress an aspect of infrastructures. When a catastrophic event occurs, infrastructures are fundamental for the emergency management and for the recovery. So I believe that in point 8, it should be stressed that also infrastructures, perhaps after point F, infrastructure are fundamental for emergency management and recovery from emergency. Besides being resilient, they must be involved in the emergency management with different or even increased use with respect to normal time.
Thank you. Rita and then Deepak.
One quick point. Thank you so much. I think this outcome document is quite elaborate. The only plea that I would like to make is that, we include a paragraph somewhere in the document. I don't know where it would fit well, because right now I don't see it. Resilient infrastructure for whom? And so there is no mention of the word people, communities, disaster affected or otherwise are climate resilient in this document. And so I think it's very important for us to define what are these resilient infrastructure meant for and for whom and how it will be used. So I think that is something probably we could add to the document. Thank you.
I'm Deepak from the World Bank. One quick and short point. I just want to kind of remind and connect on the point raised by the Dutch representative, the UK representative, and the Japan. There are also several and maybe sometimes similar activities or the initiatives by different other countries, the Quality Infrastructure, the Adaptation Commission, and like that. So in that space, I think the document could outline how it's unique and what are the connections. How we can leverage on already ongoing initiatives, but still what is the unique opportunity in the resilient infrastructure space.
I think we'll close it here. And now I invite Aruma Revi to talk a little bit more about the details. And I would like the panel to be here with us and take this thing a little bit further. Aruma Revi from Indian Institute of Human Settlements and Krishna Vats from UNDP. That displaces me.